Welcome to the ScaleUp Valley podcast, where we bring the best tech leaders in the world to share with you how to scale your SaaS business from 2 million to 100 million ARR. As we know, typically we have some of the best founders and CEOs and executives in the world sharing their experience here, but we always also wanted to kind of have the perspective of the investor in the show as well. And we had Access Strategic Ventures, we had Isomer Capital, Capnamic Ventures, Faraday Venture Partners, among others. And today we have a very special guest. It's Stephen Millard, partner at Notion. And I'm really enthusiastic about it because Stephen will not only share the kind of the investment perspective, but also how to serve the portfolio, how to help the portfolio to grow. And I know that Stephen works really hard on this from my experience talking with him in the last months, I would say, since we met in person. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So it's really a pleasure, and it would be great to kind of have our audience in the same page as you are. So who is Stephen, and how did you end at Notion, and what do you do at Notion?
So I suppose I've spent best part of 30 years trying to figure out how to help tech companies grow, some my own and some other people's. I feel that I'm maybe getting there, but I've still got a lot to learn. I joined Notion just coming up to 4 years ago, and a slightly circuitous route to get there. So I'd had a career originally as an entrepreneur myself, unsuccessfully. Had a couple of an interesting early startup job, and I went to Oracle for 8 years, which was an incredible experience. And then I was headhunted into a company called Message Labs back in 2003. And for those of you that don't know of Message Labs, was one of the world's first SaaS companies, set up in all places of Gloucestershire, and it grew from its inception at zero in 2000 to what was at the time the biggest SaaS company in Europe and the second biggest SaaS company in the world when it was acquired by Symantec in 2008 with 150 million in recurring revenue. And I was the VP of marketing there for 3 years in the middle of that business. When that firm exited, the partners, some of the founding teams of Message Lab set up Notion. They wanted to carry on working together, and they felt there was an extraordinary opportunity to become the VC they never had.
Right.
And in 2009, they set up Notion and they started investing their private personal money. And then I joined basically on the birth of the third venture fund, which was launched in the latter parts of 2015. And I came with the kind of the mandate to, in a way, help us to live up to the promise as, the very best B2B SaaS investor in Europe. And that's my remit. So yeah, it's a joy and honestly an incredible way to work and to make a living.
That's amazing. And we had a lot of guests, some of your CEOs in the show already. One of those, we had the pleasure of being very close to them, which is Babel, which just raised 60 million Series C, with Notion is involved. So I'm really, really proud of them. Muse has been here also after Series B.
Fantastic. Matt Weller.
Exactly. Do Deal. Go Cardless. Paddle.
But you've done the rounds. You're just working down the list of companies in our portfolio.
That's true, and so we are doing very, very well. And all of them, especially Muse, not because I didn't ask this to others, because I'm sure that all of them would say that Notion was critical to open up their minds and to really go to another kind of game in terms of thought process. And they also talked about something that you work a lot on platform. So the importance of meeting another peers. So the kind of CEO groups that you do or peer-to-peer groups, the CXO groups were really important to them to move their mindsets to the next stage of growth and of scale. So well done. And I'm not sure if you would like to share more names than the ones that I shared that you would like to.
I think that's entirely fine. You picked off a whole group of the best ones.
That's awesome. And just let us know a little bit the thesis of Notion before we go to the main core of the
Yes. Show. So look, we're a B2B SaaS investor. We've invested in 60 companies since 2009. I'm just going to turn off my WhatsApp before it starts beeping at me. I've lost you, Mike. There you are. Sorry about that. So yeah, we've invested in more than 60 SaaS companies since 2009. So there's kind of three things to know about us. One is that's all we do, B2B SaaS, or they're around about Series A, centered in Europe. Investing in individuals, companies who are solving massive problems and have the desire and ambition to build, category-leading companies, etc. But all B2B SaaS, and that is absolutely critical to us because while all of those companies are different, they have a huge amount in common. And we'll come back to that. The second thing is, as a team, at the partnership level, we've all worked in enterprise technology and specifically SaaS for 20 plus years each. That's before Notion. So then Notion is 10 years. So you've got people who've founded and led technology businesses for 1 to 2 decades, and then have invested in and supported SaaS companies. That is unique in Europe. There's nobody else that can come close to that, I don't think. And then you overlay the fact that we fundamentally believe in the importance of wrapping not just value around our founders, but a totally distinctive experience. Because we feel that the way we behave and the way we interact with our portfolio is even more important than what we do. And when you combine those three things, the focus, the team, and the value, then I think you get something unique. And then, the world's your oyster within B2B SaaS. There is so much opportunity still to be had, and we're eyes wide open to the best opportunities. We've just done the first close on our 4th venture fund. We've already made the first 2 investments. In fact, we've made 3, but one of them hasn't been announced yet. So we're off to the races already with that.
That's amazing, and congratulations. I really love, so it's something that we expect when an entrepreneur and the team is pitching us, so that they have the plan to win the war, and definitely Notion also has the clear plan to win the war, and why Notion is so unique and the category leader in your space. So let's start a little bit the discussion about how to scale SaaS business. You also have your own podcast, by the way. If you can share a little bit more about your podcast, so people who would love to listen to you too would come. I strongly recommend.
Thank you. We've done about 50 podcasts. I just finished recording today the final episode of the 3rd series of what we call the Pain of Scale, and this is a program where we go around 10 topics. One is an overarching kind of episode in terms of how we talk about the fundamental challenge of going from, as you're saying, 2 to 100 or 2 to 200 million, whatever it might be. Right. And then we dive into kind of key challenges: leadership, how to hire extraordinary people, how to design a category, how to grow your revenues, how to build your products, how to price, how to internationalize, fundraise, and exit. And we're quite deliberate, and we just go around those topics. And I do it because I learn a huge amount doing it. I mean, I just spent an hour this afternoon recording a podcast with the CFO of Go Cardless. It was just extraordinary. Absolutely. And I think that's the benefit we get from doing these kind of interactions. Absolutely. So yeah, that's one of my my pastimes as well as yours.
So if you don't know the Pain of Scale, ScaleUp Valley podcast, I highly recommend the Pain of Scale, and
Thank you. That's
I'm
very
also
kind of you.
for. And so let's start with the leadership team, and especially with the CEO. So one of my main obsessions is to avoid that the CEO becomes the bottleneck of growth of the company, and the leadership team and all the layers of leadership of the company. And I'm very happy to work some of the best ones in the world that really are always so with a lot of anger to learn more, to kind of beat themselves, not comparing themselves to anybody, but beating themselves every single time and ensuring that they are growing quicker than a company. And we know that in this kind of category, this is really difficult because the metrics that we need to achieve are really hard to achieve. So how can we help those CEOs and those leadership teams to grow quicker than the company? So as a chief platform officer and as a partner of Notion, how
Yeah.
to promote that?
No, it's a good question. That it is mostly up here. It's understanding how you think and how you make decisions and how you behave in certain circumstances. And this has been, I think, critical for many of the founders. I mean, if you talk to Vasco Pedro, he's a great example. He invests in the quality of his mind. He invests in understanding.
Just for the audience, Vasco Pedro is the CEO of Babel, which is invested by.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
So he invests in the quality of his mind. He invests in helping himself to think more clearly, understand how he makes decisions, and understand how your brain works. Now he's a super smart guy, but these things you have to practice. He said a really interesting thing actually when I recorded a podcast with him about a year ago, and we were talking about a very similar topic. Which is, first of all, you have to learn to let go to grow. And he's a linguist. I mean, he's so good with words, and that's why it kind of stuck with me. But if you're going to let go, you have to bring in people who've got repeat pedigree experience. And he said that we were talking about this topic, and he said, the thing is, I know I could solve most of the problems we need to solve, but I also know that when doing that, in order to learn, I'm going to make mistakes. And frankly, on the whole, I haven't got time to make many mistakes. So I need to bring in people who have experience of the next stage. And I think that's the second biggest thing. It is to be constantly looking at your team and saying, does this team and these individuals have the capacity to take me to the next level? If you look around the room and you're all in the biggest jobs of your lives, that's a problem. And so you need to get ahead of that and say, right, if we're going to go from 1 to 10 million, right? Has anybody here ever done that before? Shit, no. Well, we better get somebody who knows how to do that. Right. We've got to 10 million and we need to get to 20. Has our CTO know how to scale this kind of organization? Has our CPO ever built that kind of organization? Is the CFO got the experience to raise the amount of capital we're going to need? That just keeps going on. And you might have seen the research that Maddie Cross, who's our talent director, has done, where she looked at the hiring habits of the world's most extraordinary tech companies. And they level up their teams ruthlessly. And the tenures are less than 3 years. Typically on average, and that is a habit that you need to form. So I'd say probably those two things.
That's taking a lot of notes while doing the podcast and listening it, of course. After that, I always talk about this concept, which is very aligned with what you are saying, of keep building the next version of your leadership team. So leadership team 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and in principle, we kind of need to have a change every single quarter at least. If nothing changes in the team, maybe we are avoiding some tough decisions there. And from your experience, what are the most difficult positions to fill in the leadership team from stage of growth to stage of growth?
Well, just on one thing you said there, I think you've got to level up yourself as well as the leader. Exactly. So, it's not enough just to make sure everybody else is growing.
Right.
It's so contextual, to be honest, which is the toughest. I'd say at the early stage, it does seem to be that the hardest is the commercial lead and the sales lead.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'd also look at the product role, especially if you really need a product leader, a chief product officer. I'd say that's probably the hardest to fill in Europe. And when we look across the portfolio and we see companies that are really doing well, they typically nailed both of those. Mm-hmm. I think as you get further along in scale, different roles become more important. So you'll be adding a lot of VPs of sales. I mean, those numbers just rank up and up. And you mentioned that you're doing something different every quarter. You need to be hiring somebody extraordinary every quarter,
right?
And that's probably one of the most important things. The caliber and quality of your CFO. If you're going to go from 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 40, et cetera, you need a world-class financial brain sitting in the heart of your business. So I'm not really answering your question. They're all tough. They're all really important. It's quite contextual.
Yeah, and I think that you answered the question by saying it is really quite contextual, and I completely agree. And it seems kind of an excuse, but it's really important to understand what is the reality of the company and what is the timing and what is needed to move the company forward. And yeah, going through the team, and especially starting always with the main growth bottleneck, which is ourselves in our lives and in our businesses. And let's move to kind of the strategy. And strategy on my side is also very attached with cash. So especially in the VC game, it's kind of what are the milestones that I need to achieve to get to the next round? What is my plan to get there? And how much cash do I need to execute those milestones? And by the way, what is the plan for the long term? How will I win the category? That needs to be clear as we move more later stage. There is a very interesting rule that we always discuss here in the show from one of the partners of Battery Ventures, if I'm not wrong, Agro, who kind of thinks about the rule of tripling two times and doubling three, tripling two and doubling three, which is going from 2 to 6, 6 to 18, 18 to 36, 36 to 72, and 72 to 144 or 100 plus. That's the point. What do you think about those metrics? Are they realistic in their?
I think it's nonsense. I think it's just it's a smart bit of maths. And it's a good mental model to think about. That's what you need to do. But if you tell me that if I run 42 kilometers at 22 kilometers an hour, I'll beat Kipchoge's marathon record. That's true, but it doesn't actually make it possible, does it?
Right.
I think it's far more. It's far more complicated than that. And that is an outcome that you want to achieve. And so some firms have achieved that, and that's great. You need to be at every single level, I think, really understanding the essence of the kind of unit economics, the way you're going to acquire customers the fastest, and underlaying your growth strategy with a real understanding of capital efficiency, product market fit, then go to market fit, and really understanding repeatability and predictability. And if you can do those things, and you've got enough capital, and there's enough demand, and the market is big enough, then yes, why not? And some firms do this. I mean, like Muse Systems, they're probably not far off those kind of numbers. Unbabel, not too far off those numbers. So think of it as a mental model. It certainly isn't a rule.
Got it. And I know the story of Unbabel and of Muse, and I think that they also kind of validate my following question, which is the courage of focus and the courage of killing what is not working and doubling down on what is working, which is very scary, especially because we can get to the temptation of thinking on the short term, what we need to raise the next round, and not on the long term. So in terms of focus, what are the main issues that you see in terms of the portfolio companies getting to choose a vertical, a use case, a GU, or trying to do everything at the same time, which is typically the recipe for failure.
And it is, it's very understandable as well. I mean, I don't think we should be in any way condemning founders who are, you know, really
the drivers
opportunistically. But if I'll take Unbabel or Muse Systems as an example, they know who their best customers are. They know where they live. They know how they're going to acquire them. They know why they deliver value. So this goes back to the fundamental truisms of someone like Porter, when, you know, he'll say, you know who your customers are that you're going to serve uniquely well.
Right.
And when you do that, you also have to say who you're not going to target. So we were looking last couple of weeks ago, someone sent me the pipeline deck of Unbabel, and all of their target customers are nailed square on ideal customer profile.
Amazing.
And this is exactly, I mean, it was almost identical kind of ideal customer profile to the discussions we were having 2.5 years ago, because the market is so big. And people think that actually you can go wide, you need to go wide to get big. Actually, go deep. If the market is big enough, go deep. And I think that's what those people do incredibly well. But hey, easy to say.
Okay. And just a more general question, again, kind of combining strategy and cash in this second pillar of our conversation, which is, what were the key mistakes that you saw leadership teams doing in terms of cash? So, which might...
I'd say, can I answer a slightly different question, which is our biggest mistake. Our biggest mistake is investing too much cash before companies have product market fit. So I then extrapolate that back to the founder and say that's probably the biggest thing.
Got it. And so we discussed the team, we discussed strategy and cash. So what about execution? And in terms of execution, nowadays, everyone in the tech industry is kind of doing the same. So the dailies, weeklies, monthlies, quarterlies, all lands, cross-functional meetings. So did you see any kind of extraordinary rhythm of world-class teams, high-performing teams in your portfolio?
Yeah, I have, and I'm going to sound a bit repetitive. I had the joy of spending a few days with Muse Systems out in Prague a couple of months ago, I think it was, and they were running their all hands. And I've never seen anything quite so slick in my life. I mean, the operational efficiency with and clarity with which Matt runs that organization. Matt Weller is the CEO of Muse Systems. It's quite extraordinary.
Has been here in the podcast. Go to see the show.
Yeah, he really is a very, very impressive man. And what he does incredibly well is that he creates a very operationally structured framework, but there's a huge amount of freedom within that. So I think that's what the best organizations do. They're fundamentally aligned. They know what their purpose is. They've got clarity about their values and their behaviors. And they operate with freedom within a framework. And that's what I think many of the best companies do.
Love it. Just writing it down, freedom with a framework. So it's
freedom within a framework.
Within a framework. So that's really, really, really powerful. And we come to one of our favorite questions in the show, which is, if you had the opportunity to kind of get back to 4 years ago when you joined Notion as a partner and chief platform officer, what kind of advice would you tell yourself, or would you offer yourself?
You know nothing. you know less than nothing. And the things that you do know, you need to unlearn. I think in the first couple of years, in particular in the first year, I thought my job was to fix things. And frankly, you can't really do that. And also, it's not my job. And it's kind of, it feels wrong anyway. And so what I turned into saying, well, actually, how can I learn, as opposed to how can I help? And by learning more from people like Unbabble or Go Cardless or Muse or whoever it is, then I can help, and just be way more curious and way more open-minded to the fact that there are so many different ways to solve a problem. There are so many different ways to grow a company. There are so many ways to achieve scale that we haven't thought of yet. And I think be completely wary about any received wisdom. If anybody says it's done like this, it will always be done like that. Just walk them out the door, because they may be right, but you've got to be open to the fact that there's other ways of doing things. So, yeah, I just say be open, be way more curious, and start learning fast.
Stephen, it was such a pleasure, such a masterpiece to be listened and heard again. So thanks so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure.